Hello, friends. Hello, friends. A tradition unlike any other.
Oh, my goodness. In your life, have you seen anything like that?
There it is! Adam Scott, a life changer. Mashed potato!
Here it comes.
The team at Cobra Golf are set to introduce additions to its collection of King putters, making the offerings available in a sleek black colourway, the perfect complement to the limited edition black LTDX drivers and King black wedges. The lineup of black putters includes both King 3D printed and King Vintage Series models, along with two new mallet styles, the King Cuda and Cuda 40. All King Collection putters come standard with the Cobra Super Stroke Traction Tour 2.0 grip and KBS Tour 120 shaft. The new additions to the King 3D printed and vintage series will be available from July this year. For more information on the entire King family of products, visit cobragolf.com. This is the 19th Tee podcast. Kieran Marsh and Nathan Drudy back with you post the return of the Australian Open Drudster. And we're going to, just off the very top here, I think we're going to start off with positives because, there's plenty to get through. It was a fantastic amalgamation of the men's, the women's, and the All Abilities Championship across both the Victoria Golf Club and Kingston Heath over the weekend. I think it was a display of the very best of the Sandbelt and the Australian, I suppose, golf landscape has to offer. But I think there are some things that we will need to discuss at the back end. And I know, did a bit of research today. So fun fact, I think you'd have to cast your mind back to Boxing Day of 1999 to see an Australian come off a longer run than I think you're going to come off tonight. And that was the debut of Brett Lee against India that year. Took a fiver in his debut. But he did, took a fiver in his debut against the Indians on Boxing Day in 1999.
Brilliant.
I get the sense that based on some of our conversations over the weekend, you may in fact be coming off a longer run than Binger this evening with a few people in your sights. So we will, off the top though, speak about Adrian Meronk, the first Polishman to win the Stonehaven Cup, to be crowned the Australian Open champion. And I think quite impressive coming down the stretch to withhold not just the charge of Adam Scott, but probably more importantly, the momentum of the home crowd, because he really had to. There was no one there that wanted him to win, with the greatest respect to Adrian. Absolutely nobody. I didn't see any Polish flags being waved around there at Victoria. He had to do it against both the momentum of his playing partner, but also the momentum of the crowd around him.
Yeah, well, it was quite exciting for most of the final day, and then just all sort of, I don't know, kind of unfolded very quickly, and as we like to say, had the Mendoza effect. Did Adam Scotty? He couldn't stop, unfortunately. But I think it was interesting. Yeah, it was funny seeing a non-Australian win the Australian Open, and it's the second time now that it's happened in 3 years. Obviously, Abraham Answer won in 2018, Spieth was 16, 14, and McIlroy was 2013. So I don't know. I just, because we've only had one Australian Open that we've talked about on this show, I think, given that the last two have been cancelled. So I don't know. I just had this weird sense in my head that an Australian was going to win the Australian Open, and I was wrong. I was very wrong.
It was a little deflating in many respects because you had a lot of, I think, potential there. Not just Scotty, but Min Woo certainly bucked his head, particularly on Saturday with a 65 there on the third round, and played, well, not well enough, but well again on Sunday to keep himself in contention. And of course, Hayden Barron, who we'll get to, a good friend of this podcast, has, certainly changed his fortunes for 2023 with the T4 finish. But realistically, it was all on Scotty. And we held high hopes there for a period of time. But to your point, they certainly were dashed in the back nine in particular. And credit to Adrian Meronk, he finished well. I mean, 63 on Saturday and then a 66. He's only got one round there over par, and that was his opener. So really, in terms of the complete package, on balance, a really fine 4 days for the Polishman.
Yeah, and as you said there, it was the Saturday that set it up with the 63. Just looking back at his scorecard here, just 2 bogeys and a whole heap of birdies, particularly that front nine went out in 30. and was on track to shoot 20 in the 20s until he bogeyed the par 5 ninth. And I think just to finish with an eagle the way he did as well, it was pretty impressive. And it was funny. I think we mentioned last week, it was great to see that some of the European Tour or DP World Tour players actually coming down and playing the Australian Open. And we mentioned Adrian Meronk, and I think from memory, I don't think he played super well. He might have even missed the cut last week. But yeah, just watching that first round, it was, that back nine, 3 bogeys in a row. And I was like, oh God, like this isn't a great indictment of the DP World Tour. And sure enough, he turned it around very, very quickly. And as I said, highlighted by that Saturday 63 and held his nerve. And, as you said, really had to fight the crowd as well, because the crowd were right behind Scotty and Min Woo being our 2 best hopes, definitely going into the day anyway.
So catapults Meronk into the top 50 in the world, I believe, for the first time in his career, and he's likely to finish the year there, I think, around 47, 48. And a lot of what I've seen post, end of the tournament throughout today is talk about him maybe putting himself in Ryder Cup contention. I always like this. We're not all that far away, right? We're under 12 months now, and everything almost, irrespective of whether you're playing PGA Tour, European Tour, everything has Ryder Cup implications. It's one of the great things about the countdown to what is undoubtedly the best event in golf. But you pop up anywhere in the world. If you're a Polishman winning on the Sandbells in Australia, they have Ryder Cup implications, Trudes, and he seems to be entering the conversation.
I could think of a less relevant tournament for Adrian Meronk to win to have Ryder Cup implications. And there's no disrespect to the Australian Open, but to your point there, in 35-degree heat on the sandbelt in a rock hard course, I wouldn't have thought that's got any relevance to. I think it's Marco Simone next year that we're going to. I was just about to say. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought so. I wouldn't have thought so. And with due respect to Adrian Meronk, I don't think he's going to be on the Ryder Cup team. I could probably assemble 12 to 15 better players than Adrian Meronk right now. Whether some of those are eligible to play with the live golf stuff, I don't know. But I don't want to take anything away from Adrian Meronk. But I don't think he's playing Ryder Cup next year.
No, I tend to agree, but he is our Australian Open champion and will be for at least another 12 months, pending his return down under to defend next year. Interesting, Drudes, before we, I suppose, move down the leaderboard. One of the things I said at the top, I think certainly one of the highlights of the weekend was simply the advertisement of the Sandbelt. I mean, I think probably, not probably, certainly not to the same extent as I think the President's Cup at Royal Melbourne back in 2019. But any golf played on some of those courses, Kingston Heath and Victoria are 2 of the best in the region. And when they get beamed to global audiences, who, to be fair, probably saw more of the golf than we did domestically over the 4 days on volume. But, I've heard, and read some overseas golf commentary just again, absolutely fawning over the Sandbelt. So I read with interest, though, James Sutherland essentially allude to the fact that they would look to Sydney or New South Wales next year in some way, shape or form. So this is why people in James Sutherland's positions make these decisions, Drudes, and I'm sure it will become increasingly about the highest bidder because that is the commercial nature of the sport, and we can't criticise that because it's something we've been critical of them for not doing previously. But yeah, it's interesting that it's clearly our best golfing region, save for if you're going to take a tournament down to Tasmania. So I just wonder, 1 year back, and we've seen how good the golf was across both courses, why you'd be immediately, literally probably as the final putt drops, you're already talking about taking it to New South Wales next year. I thought the timing was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting argument that we've probably had many times, and I refer back to the conversation that we had with Michael Clayton, is that why would I care about the Australian Open here in Perth? We haven't had it since the 70s. The last time that we hosted it was at Lake Karrinyup here, which is still one of the top 15 courses in the country. And I certainly understand the commercial nature of it, which we've alluded to many times, as you rightly pointed out. I just think I understand the pros and cons behind both ways of let's take it around the country and see what the interest is like from all interested parties in terms of state government, in terms of crowds, etc. I also understand the argument that it's, hey, let's take it to Sydney because we've got the highest population. Let's take it to Melbourne because they've got the best golf courses. I understand all of that, and I don't really know what the position is where I land right now, but I agree with you that it was a fantastic advertisement for the Sandbelt and Victorian golf in general. Rumours already circulating that Kingston Heath will host the President's Cup in 2028, which will be fascinating to see if that comes to light. It was one of those ones that I was sitting there over the weekend watching and going, like, how many West Australians are actually interested in this right now, or South Australians are actually interested in it when we call it our National Open and it hasn't come here for 50 years. It's an interesting one. And I think we'd obviously love to get some answers or get some insight as to how these things work. But the underlying thing would be financial and commercial viability.
Don't get me wrong. I think I see both sides. What I would suggest is I wouldn't agree with both the Open and the PGA Championship having an anchor tenant. I think one needs to move around. I suppose my only criticism would be if we all agree, and I don't necessarily think there's any conjecture or argument that the Sandbelt is our best golf region, then surely it should have the anchor of one of those, and the other moves around.
Agreed.
And that is not at all critical of the PGA Championship, which was at Royal Pines for the better part of 10 years and has now made a long-term commitment to Royal Queensland, which is a fantastic course. But if we're going to be anchored anywhere, surely it's our premier golf region, whether that's the PGA or the Open, and the other becomes the travelling. I shouldn't say circus, but that's the phrase. And that is what goes around. Because I agree, like, there are places, and it entered the conversation, when we began to hear whispers of whom Live Golf was speaking with. There's no coincidence that there was, clubs in Sydney and clubs in Adelaide and clubs in Western Australia and clubs, to be fair, in Southeast Queensland as well. It's regions that had, for the most part, been ignored. So the tour does have a job to manage its stakeholders around the country. I just think we've seen again, particularly for, the PGA didn't get much overseas coverage. The Open did, for whatever reason. And if that's going to be the case, then we've surely got to be putting our best foot forward in terms of what we broadcast to the world by way of golf regions.
Yeah, and look, if it's the Australian Open that stays in the Sandbelt, then I'm entirely fine with that. You're absolutely right that maybe it is the PGA that needs to travel around the country and get, I guess, all of Australia involved in it. But again, it talks to where the commercial money comes from. I mean, there was no secret that anyone watching the broadcast this week would have seen the absolute plethora of in-your-face, you were smacked every which way with Visit Victoria marketing and advertising to the point where it was kind of like, I'd fuck off, Melbourne. Like, I don't want to come anymore. I was in. I'm not coming anymore. Like, I get it. You like sport. So I understand that the Victorian government obviously paid a lot of money for that event to be there, and that's where the tour's gone. And maybe that's more of an indictment on where the tour is from a financial perspective in terms of who's going to cough up the most money is going to get it. And that's just how each of the individual state government relations are going to have to work. If WA's got no interest in throwing money at the Australian PGA or at the Australian Open, then what hope have we got of bringing it over here if there is no incentive financially for it to move away from someone who wants to put their hand in their pocket?
Very little. And you've surmised that incredibly well, as per. Let's move down the leaderboard. Scotty, what have you made of? I mean, he does have at least one more outing, Cathedral Invitational tomorrow.
On right now, first day.
Yes, well, first day today, as we heard from the chairman and founder David Evans. Today was the member pro day, so members of Cathedral Lodge play with their assigned pros, and then the pros carry their score over into tomorrow for the single day event. Obviously, the cumulative score across 2 days will be the winner. Scotty is there amongst a host of other stars. It's a great lineup, as we heard. That's his third outing. I'm pretty sure that's it. I don't think he's got anything more on. I would imagine he's heading back to the States. Might stay on for Christmas, but probably heading off to the States after that. It's been good. I mean, I think obviously the PGA wasn't lights out, but we saw some really, really good golf from him across this weekend, and we spoke about the fade out in the second 9 on Sunday. Save for that, it was exciting for a defined period of time. It was very exciting.
Yeah, and look, I said a similar thing about Leash last week that, I think.
What are our expectations?
Well, what are our expectations, but also what is his role here? Like, obviously, he's here to compete and win, but him coming back is such a massive win for the tour in and of itself. Even if he missed the cut, like he's serving a purpose by bringing crowds in. So him playing the way that he did over the past fortnight has been a massive win for the tour. 2 eagles on the final holes in rounds 2 and 3 just to get the crowd a bit excited. But yeah, obviously it wasn't like he played terribly. He made pars. It's funny, like you look at that back 9 scorecard, he had 1 birdie and a double bogey, and it seemed like that he was never in control of his ball. And maybe that stems back to that run at 7 and 8 where he made back-to-back bogeys. And yeah, I don't know. It was just, it felt deflating because Meronk was going the other way and he was kind of sinking. So I think the writing was on the wall sort of early in that back 9, as much as we didn't want it to be. But all in all, I mean, I take his last 2 weeks as a win. Well, I think on face value.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would probably, I wouldn't say pushback. That's probably the right phrasing. I think he's still a little more competitive than Leash. It's not necessarily a criticism to Leash, but I think the drop-off's been a little more stark in that case. When Scotty's driver is on, that seems to me like the biggest Achilles heel at the moment. And he had the 2-way miss going at Royal Queensland, and it was bad. It was ugly. But when he's hitting the ball well off the tee, I think he's still absolutely got the approach game to compete on certain courses. Not everywhere in the world, certainly not everywhere on the PGA Tour, but there'll be weeks where he'll buck his head if he's driving the ball well off the tee. So to come back and to get at least one of those performances out of him, of the 2 big ones, and obviously we get Cathedral at the moment, but to see him go on a run, I think, to your point, is turning up's a win, absolutely, and he draws a crowd, but I think you reinforce that. In fact, you might turn curiosity into conversion by performing well. And I'm glad we saw him do that at least once across the fortnight, because I think Smithy's caught our imagination and he's definitely taken the mantle, but this is still our only Masters winner. And he still holds a very special place, I think, in the heart of Australian golf. And it means a lot to come back and perform well. So good on him. Good on him, I say, Druids. Minwoo Lee, T4 last week, outright 3rd this week. Again, a huge Saturday with a 65. Without, like, I said it last week, I love watching him play. There's something very unique about not just his golf, but just him in general, which I enjoy. This is about what I'd expect, though, and I think that's a good thing. It's not meant as a criticism. It should be seen as a compliment, because I expect him now to come back. In fact, I might expect a little bit more. I expect him now to maybe convert and win. So T4 last week, excellent. Outright 3rd this week, great. left wanting a little more because that's what he's capable of now. And we've seen that through some performances, most specifically on the European Tour this year.
Yeah, interesting to note that he and Minjee both finished at 8 under par when we were having that discussion last week as well. So that's interesting. No, look, I entirely agree with you. I think I think he was good this week, but I probably thought that he would win one of these two. That's where my gut was kind of feeling, and I think now, as we know, he has taken the steps forward that he has. Obviously, with his wins, he's been very competitive in big events. So I think he's not in a way, he is kind of like the young star, the young kid. We're kind of, what's his ceiling? We don't really know what he's capable of. But in a way, he's also past that, and we're kind of expecting results now. And I think it's tough, like for us. Well, it's not tough for us to sit here as armchair critics, but it's going to be tough for him, I think, in a lot of ways to go, well, there is a bit of expectation on me now to perform, because we have been talking about Minwoo Lee for the best part of 10 years almost.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you're not wrong. No, you're not wrong. And I think, this year felt like a year where we thought maybe he takes the step up to the PGA Tour.
mm-hmm.
Not obviously by any means playing a full schedule or anything, but like certainly taking his opportunities and getting himself into a handful of tournaments and maybe making a few cuts and just starting to find his feet. Wasn't necessarily the case. Enjoyed some wonderful success, particularly through the Spanish loop of the European Tour.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope, like I imagine he'll play out a bunch of tournaments. We go on a break now for a period of time till the new year, but there's some lucrative tournaments on the other side. And that end of season tournament will be a carrot for a lot of guys. So how long he hangs around for remains to be seen. But yeah, I think we want to see that. Right? We want to see that progression in 23. And I think that's a must for him.
Yeah. And look, I don't have no doubt that we will see a step up from him. He's immensely talented. He's got all the hallmarks of being the gun golfer that we know that he will be. Let's
talk about our mate. Without any disrespect meant to Alejandro Canizares, who also finished at 7 under. I really want to talk about Hayden Barron. What? Where are we? What a finish! Was it an eagle or a birdie?
Eagle.
Eagle on the 18th to get himself into a 70, even past 70, and jump up into a tie for fourth. And of course, the top three otherwise not exempt to the Open Championship secured their places. And he is one of those. He is off to the Open Championship in 2023, which is a wonderful story.
Yeah, fantastic. And that eagle as well, worth about $20,000. Right. on the 18th as well. So
that's right.
Look, I'm just really pumped for him. I think overall, like he, he does tune in occasionally to this show as well. So we'll say only good things. No, but there is only good things to say about Hayden Barron, because the thing that I love most about him is that he's just a genuinely nice guy. He won the Blitz event here almost 12 months ago, and obviously, we've had him on the show, and I went out to WA Golf Club and did the interview with him, and have kept in touch, and afterwards, like, he made sure that I had a beer, and we all had a chat, and like, that's just the sort of guy that he is, and I think I love seeing good people do good things, and he's definitely one of those. So to see him go the way that he's going is really impressive. Just steady golf. I mean, the back nine was clearly playing a lot tougher, and he managed to negate that on all 3 days. Had a bit of trouble with the par 3 16th, as many of the players did. Bogeyed that every day, but picked up the shots again on 18. So yeah, I don't know. He's one of my genuine favorite guys to root for. I think he's got a great future ahead of him, and yeah, I'm just pumped for him for what he's achieved off the back end of this.
I think you phrased it well. Like, there's nothing flashy about his game. Rinses it off the tee. Like, he's a big hitter.
Yeah.
But, it kind of flagged it in our conversation with Wazza last week. Increasingly, the higher up you get and the further you go in this game, it's not necessarily about your ceiling. It's about the gap between that and your floor and making sure that's as small as possible. And Hayden Barron strikes me as exactly that. He's a guy that has a really high floor and an equally high ceiling. So, yeah, he's got a game that's very sustainable. It's rarely inconsistent. It's rarely erratic, and I think that's a huge feather in his cap moving forward. It will serve him well as he starts to get more of these international opportunities. So, congratulations to Hayden. I'm sure someone will certainly seek to have another chat to prior to the end of the summer.
Yes.
Now, I'm conscious. This could go for 3 hours. But is there anyone else really that jumped out at you? Because there also is an Australian Women's Open we need to speak about, and we should also touch on the All Abilities. So, is there anyone else from a men's perspective that jumped out you wanted to mention?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to mention Dave Micheluzzi. Leading after 36 holes, I think definitely leading after the first day was 3 shots up, and I'm pretty sure he was leading after 36 holes, and then unfortunately fell away with a 3 over par and a 1 over par on the final day. Just the driver continues to be an issue, I think, for Mika, and some of the ball striking. Found himself in some really, really awkward spots early in the round, and that putter, as you've mentioned quite a few times, has heated up for him, which is excellent, but it's saving his ass at the moment. So he will be no doubt bitterly disappointed with the way that he played over the weekend. He has massive expectations of himself, perhaps sometimes unfairly put upon himself, but he'll be disappointed, no doubt. But he finishes. Where did he actually finish? T10 at T10 at 4 under par. So 28 grand in the bank. I'm sure he'll find something to do with his car. Maybe he'll have to get a new exhaust, because I believe he may have driven. Look, unconfirmed reports may have driven just a touch too quickly over a speed bump, and it was completely ripped off in the Victoria Golf Club car park. So maybe that's what this week's paycheck will be being put towards. Big car guy. I would have thought.
Huge car guy. 63 on Thursday. That was unbelievable.
Oh.
Like I tuned in. I was like, this bloke, he just will not stop. He's just on fire. And then, as you say, the wheels got a little loose across the remainder of the weekend. But his best golf at the moment is certainly mixing it with the remainder of the field. Pleasingly, it keeps him second, outright second in the order of merit. That top 10 again.
Is it second? It's really first. I mean, is Cam Smith just irrelevant in this conversation? Like, Smith, Scott, I know they're there for the purpose of it, but surely like Smith, Lee, Scott, and Scrivener are just irrelevant in this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I tend to agree. Mick is still the best part of 300 points behind him, though. So, does need to play a bunch of tournaments. And
there should be a minimum number of tournaments you have to play.
Tend to think that's a wonderful suggestion. So Hayden Barron, a big mover in the order of merit. He's up in the top 10 and outright 9th. Dean Lawson maintains a good spot there in 7th. Our man, the Whizzer, 12th there, just outside the top 10. So, look, not too many others I wanted to make mention of. Good finish for Lucas Herbert there, also T10, the same with Mika. Jason Scrivener, obviously, played the lights out at Royal Queensland. Finished T18. He's a bunch of shots back there at 2 under. Matt Van Cliff, someone I do want to make mention of. He's playing good golf at the moment. We saw this a bit at the back end of the European season, but he played well in Royal Queensland last week. And look, T28's still T28, but it's good to see him back playing some good golf. He's a favourite of this podcast, as we know, as is Dimi Papadakis, who is also in a tie for 28th. And then it starts to roll away there. A lot of over-par stuff. Before we move off the men's, Trudes, should make mention of Cameron Smith, our order of merit leader. Obviously, great little story. got through 2 rounds. We then had this cut after a third round we were unaware of. That we'll get to momentarily. Smithy didn't think he was going to be there, took himself off to the pub, had a few schooners, only to get a text about an early morning tea time because the cut had blown out. So these guys are really, I mean, we spoke about, one of the motivating factors for Liv, spend more time at home, enjoy your time at home. We saw some of the celebrations at the Breakfast Creek Hotel that came out of the PGA Championship victory. And he's just clearly in a great headspace at the moment, very relaxed.
Yeah.
So, it's great to see.
Good to see.
Over on the women's side, it was South African Ashley Buhai who won the Australian Women's Open. Just by the one shot in the end, she had a pretty comfortable lead for a decent part of the final round. She wins by one in the end, as I said, over Gio Shin of South Korea. But it's the two Aussies that I want to speak about. No disrespect to Ashley Buhai. Congratulations to her. I think it's a potentially first South African winner of the Australian Women's Open as well. So 2 firsts on the men's and women's side. But the first one I want to speak about, Grace Kim. Oh, Grace. She looks so good for 98% of the weekend. And doubles. Doubles the 18th. And that's not the tournament. She finishes 3 shots back, but certainly didn't help.
Yeah, agreed. She looked so good that day one. She was the outright leader after the first day and just flushing the ball and putting just so well. And I thought, wow, like if she can continue this for the remaining 3 days, like no one's going to catch her at all. And she showed glimpses of that across the rest of it. Round 3, I think she was a couple under par overall, but yeah, just a couple of costly errors at bad times for Grace. But again, like we're talking about such a young talent and we know that she's going to be an incredible golfer in years to come. And I'm sure this experience will only add to what she's going to give back to Aussie golf in the next few years.
100%. I mean, she's had a great year playing over a bunch of tournaments on the Symetra Tour, which is the feeder tour to the LPGA. I think it's a matter of when, not if, and I think it'll be very soon that she makes that jump up to the LPGA. She's played well again today. First day of the Cathedral, I think she only wanted to off Louis Dobler's lead there at Cathedral Lodge. So clearly he's wiped the disappointment off and got straight back into it a day later. But I think it's telling, right? You look at this round 4 scores. So Buhai, the winners, 1 over. Shin in second, 3 over. Hannah Green in third at 2 over. Grace Kim is the only member of the top 4 to be even par. And she's done that with a double on 18. So, she was right there and played incredibly well. So Hannah Green, obviously, as I said, she finishes at 10 under. Some great golf from her. Minjee Lee in 5th at 8 under, a shot behind Grace Kim. Some good names here too, Druids. Like we got Soyeon Ryu was in the field. She's a couple of shots back at 6 under. Jennifer Cupshow from America was there as well. But worth mentioning a few other Aussies. Steph Kiriakou, a great friend of this podcast, in tie for 8th at 5 under. Cassie Porter was alongside Cupshow at 1 under. And it goes on and on. But great to see a tight finish in the women's. We would have loved to have seen one of those, Kim, Green, Lee, someone get over the line. But much like the men's, it was a slightly deflating finish, albeit a nod to the international flavour. So congratulations to Ashley Buhai. Anything else out of the women's, Drew?
No, not really. I just, Hannah Green, I feel like, it was just so tough. I mean, 2 doubles on that front 9 on the final day just really took the wind out of the sails early. And then to finish with a birdie on 9 and make the turn 3 over, it was kind of like, this is going to be an uphill battle, but if there's anyone out there that can maybe do it, it's going to be her. And then bogeyed 10 straight away. And I know she finished birdie, but yeah, it was disappointing for Hannah. And I know that she'll be disappointed within herself as well, but she's only 2 shots back and didn't play that well over the last couple of days. So she's going to win one of these, no doubt.
No doubt in my mind. Drews, and then in the all abilities, young Englishman by the name of Kip Poppet who is the number one all abilities player in the world. He takes the tournament, comes down and gets the job done. You may not have seen it. And for any of our listeners who haven't, jump on and further proof that the European Tour is without peer when it comes to content. It's embarrassing, some of the stuff the PGA Tour puts out comparatively from a content perspective. Not all that long ago, probably 2 or 3 months, the European Tour did about a 15-minute video on their YouTube channel with Kip Poppet and telling his story as the number one all abilities player in the world. And it is a phenomenal piece of content. So I would highly recommend taking the 15 minutes to get to know Kip Poppet. Sensational golfer in his own. Wonderful to see. Wonderful to see the All Abilities Championship played currently alongside the men's and women's. I know we've got some things to discuss before that, and some stuff to work through in terms of making all three work at the same time. But as a concept, I thought it did show some wonderful things about the game of golf across the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been toying with this sort of back and forth for a little while, and it's fantastic to see all three work together. I think what probably the expectation was of what I think it ties into the broadcast. What I expected to see and what I did see were two very different things in terms of the tournament and how it was then broadcast into obviously the men's stuff. You had so much content being pumped out, and then it was the women's, and then you just had like a couple of all ability shots here, and like this, and it was just, it felt really disjointed is probably the best way that I can describe it. So be interesting to see how they play this moving forward.
Yeah, and we're going to pivot, I think, to the to the critical feedback, I think you'd call it.
Just observations.
But yeah, I read an interesting observation, we'll call it that, in the sense that selling this tournament was probably far more appealing commercially to have the three tournaments running concurrently at the same time, because it offers, really, when you think about it, a wonderful commercial platform for a sponsor or sponsors to put their name to as a concept. In execution, I think some holes, and there's certainly an argument to be heard that, in fact, playing them all at the same time takes the shine off all three and dilutes the product, which, yeah, I do hear that argument and do, in many respects, tend to agree.
Well, I think the execution was, they executed it fine. It's just how it's just the product that was then delivered is detrimental to the overall product of the game. I thought, like, the broadcast for me, obviously, like, I wasn't able to be on the ground, so I'm relying on the broadcast to watch our biggest event that we have.
Yep.
Our National Open. Very excited to see it, and like I alluded to it before, it just seemed like an advertising campaign for Visit Victoria. Like the amount of ads, the even in there was a post-round interview with Hannah Green, and the first two questions she got asked was how great it was to be playing in Victoria and how great are these Victorian crowds. Like, I don't understand that. Like, it and I think, you and I have probably spoken about this offline more than we have online. Like, but in a year where it is so important to get people on side with the game of golf, like, I felt like this was a step backwards for people that couldn't be in Victoria.
Yeah, I think so. There's probably some primary criticisms here. I think it's worth noting that you and I both felt, but we also felt as though we found a community. I don't think we were
Oh,
Robinson Crusoe in our feelings. It would be fair to say, based on some of the feedback online.
mm-hmm.
So a few things. I suppose the inflexibility to cover anybody outside of like a featured 3 or 4 groups, incredibly frustrating. I mean, you made the point and did so via our channels about Mika being in the lead on Friday, was it? We missed his last
Yeah.
2
Last 3 holes. Yeah.
last 3 holes entirely, which seems absurd. Like that's your tournament leader. He just didn't happen to fall in a friendly group for the cameras. We had across the weekend, like Saturday and Sunday, the 2 biggest days, we were missing the first few holes of our final groups because of the time at which the broadcast was starting, which makes absolutely no sense to me. Like the broadcast is running on Channel 9, yes, as the free-to-air broadcast partner, and sure, there are some constraints around programming when it comes to free-to-air, but the product's also running on KO, which literally is a streaming platform. Like there is no excuse that cameras wouldn't be running for 12 hours a day on KO on that tournament. And I'm not suggesting you bring in your top tier talent to commentate for 12 hours a day, because we know that's not how it works. But like, I'm also not suggesting we're in the same ballpark. Look how the Masters do it.
Mm.
The Masters literally have featured groups, featured holes. They've got like 8 different commentary teams over Augusta National. So if you want to, like, if you need to have a neat packaged 4-hour product, sure, bring your big hitters in for that. But there's no excuse not to run a camera for 12 hours on a streaming platform. There's no other content going on KO, literally. Like, I just do not understand why we were missing final groups. Like, that's absurd. They're not starting until like midday. That's wild.
Oh, and like I think that's the stuff that, I was sitting there on Friday Arvo, had the TV on in the background, and I was like Mika's playing good golf, like he's rallied, he's pushing on. And then like sort of like a highlights package started and some overlay music, and then they were like, and that's all from the Australian Open. And I was like, hold on, like, we're not finished.
What do you mean?
Like it's like the broadcast finishing halfway through the final quarter really like the grand final. This is our grand final. And
that's actually not a stupid thing to say. People go, "Oh yeah, good one." It's actually it's quite a good analogy.
Like it was like I was both baffled and probably a bit angry as a golf fan as well. Like I was, and then to have the broadcast start after the leaders have teed off, it just makes no sense at all. And I don't know. There's clearly got to be a reason behind it, but both parties have agreed to the tee times. Both parties have agreed to the broadcast time starting at this time, and yet the schedule has not been fit in around the broadcast. Like I'm confused by it, and I know that we are in the majority. I mean, you've got to look at social media. We were inundated with messages on Instagram, in I don't know, 30, 40, 50 plus you have a look at social media's commentary. Every post that the tours put up has been whacked with the broadcast product, and I think it's really frustrating because from all reports, the on-ground experience at Vic was fantastic. Like they had a little fan village set up and everything, and that looked like a lot of fun and it looked great. But unfortunately, the product, that was probably maybe like 2 or 3% of their overall viewership was the people on the ground. The broadcast product alienated so many people, and it's a very, very difficult job to broadcast a golf tournament because it is spread out so much. But I almost wonder if we set ourselves up for failure by firstly running this across 2 courses. I'm not 100% sold on that being the way forward. I know the first 2 days, like we only had 2 days at Kingston Heath, but I'm not 100% sold on that being the way moving forward. But I understand that if we're going to run the Australian Open, the Women's Australian Open, and the All Abilities, we've probably got to run it over 2 tournaments. So yeah, I think the fans are in between a rock and a hard place on this one, and the tour's ultimately got to make a decision on where they see value in this, and whether that's the broadcast or the in-person experience. And I don't like. I'm talking from my perspective as being a TV viewer.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like you and I both listen to some American-based golf content, and I feel as though we have finally, just by virtue of the fact we haven't really had much going on domestically for 3 years, we finally are feeling the frustrations of those viewing the PGA Tour based in America. Because I always find the criticism of the PGA Tour's ad schedule a little weird, because I actually think the coverage we get here in Australia is quite good.
Yeah,
of the PGA Tour. And not to sound all highbrow, but there may be some intricacies here that many of our listeners don't understand, in the sense that when you're watching a tournament domestically, whether it's us watching the Australian Open or an American living in America watching a PGA Tour event, the broadcast you watch is different to what those overseas watch, because they split the feed. So there is a world feed or an international feed that's taken and then bought. So Foxtel or KO buys the rights to show the international feed of PGA Tour events domestically here in Australia, whereas the network, be it CBS or NBC, sometimes Fox, shows the golf in America. So we take different feeds, right? It's exactly what's happened here, because if you listen to, as I have, a bunch of people internationally, particularly in America, tuning in to the Australian Open over the weekend, and as I said at the top, singing the praises. Wonderful advertisement of Sandbelt. Certainly no complaints about missing starts or finishes. Certainly no complaints about ad schedules. Certainly no complaints about having Victoria rammed down their throat. So I finally feel as though I understand, because what we've been served domestically, ironically, is a far inferior broadcast product than what people around the world were experiencing of our international tournament. I only say that because I was very interested. You and I kind of spoke about this before we record tonight. Very interested to read Ewan Porter, who I think it should be said before we speak about this, does an exceptional job. Now, we're fortunate to have some wonderful golf commentators who are internationally experienced. Ports is one. Ali Whitaker is another who does a wonderful job when she comes home, primarily on the European tour. She works and she does come home for summer events. Ali's excellent. We have some that are domestically based and get trotted out for summer events, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I do and can appreciate, as a rusted on fan, the difference of someone who travels the world to do it. And Ports is one of those. Ports has been excellent with his on-course commentary. I think he provides a wonderful insight. Clearly was probably aware, if not acutely aware, of the feedback that the broadcast was getting, because wakes up this morning. Twitter's telling me this was 12 hours ago. So this is, 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning. Jumps on Twitter across 2 tweets. Thoughts on at Aussie Open golf from someone inside the ropes and with some knowledge and commercial responsibilities. Great crowds, wonderful courses and terrific golf. Positives far outweigh the negatives. Production is hamstrung due to 4 by 3 minute ad breaks per hour, plus tourism promos and other packages. Missed way too many critical shots due to this, and most of it was in delay. This is Australia's greatest golf tournament for both genders and deserves the best. Fingers crossed it's all ironed out for 2023. Then, some 9 hours later, jumps back on. The past 4 months I've commentated for at PGA Tour, at DP World Tour, at LPGA, and at PGA of Australia. Speaking to his international bona fides, as we just mentioned. I love the game, and there's currently a lot of traction for golf globally, men and women. Selfishly, I want to see Australian golf on everyone's radar and deliver a world-class product every time. Fascinating. Really appreciate Orts' honesty. Don't expect anything less from him, but it's clear to me that those part of the broadcast team probably felt the feedback, I would suggest, to the point at which Sports felt the need to clarify a few things, which we don't often see.
Well, first and foremost, and I probably should have prefaced my conversation with this, like the commentary team and everyone involved in terms of Nico Hearn and the guys and Gowie and everyone involved did a fantastic job across all 4 days. I thought they were excellent, and they have been all year. What they deliver in terms of color commentary and talking us through the golf course is fantastic. It's second to none. I guess my frustration, and I was just scrolling through then as you were talking, like the page, the tour's Instagram, the tour's Facebook, it's just lit up with comments, people being like, it was a horrible, horrible coverage. You've got for the first time back in 2 years, we had the Australian Open, and it was something that we'd been looking forward to for so long. And just to see it delivered in that manner was really disappointing. And there is no doubt that Hortz and Nico Hearn and the rest of the team would have jumped on social media and seeing the commentary, because it's everywhere. We're not in the minority here, like banging our fucking fists on the desk going like, this isn't good enough. It wasn't good enough for Nathan and Kieran.
We may have been in the past, but I don't feel like we are here now.
No, like I just, I came away after the PGA last week. I was like, this is going to be a really interesting 2 weeks of golf, and it's going to be, as we've spoken about, this is one of the most important summers that we've had for such a long time for the game. And after the PGA came in and we did this show, and I was like, we're on track. Like, this is looking really, really good. And then we had our biggest event that was maybe hamstrung in and of itself by the format that we rolled out, as I said, across 2 different courses with 3 different competitions. And maybe we're trying to get too much done in not enough time. And I feel let down as a fan, because I'm like, how can you end the broadcast before your leader has finished his round of golf? How can you start the broadcast after the leaders of the Australian Open are on the second hole and go, oh, just in case you missed it, here's Adam Scott teeing off on 1? It's like, no, it's just not acceptable as a golf fan.
Yeah.
Like it's, and I agree with you. Like we're finally understanding what some of these American fans have got. And it's just like, we as golf fans are one of, if not the most important stakeholder in the game. Like we it felt like we weren't treated like that over the weekend. And yeah, I'm really disappointed in it. I don't know if it's a Fox thing. I don't know if it's a KO thing. I don't know if it's a Golf Australia thing or the Tours thing. Like, I don't know where the blame lies, but someone's got to come together to get an answer for it for next year.
I think also what made it really frustrating for me, and look, I acknowledge certainly there are some stark differences in the delivery of the Australian PGA and the delivery of the Australian Open. Primarily the fact that it's 3 tournaments running at the same time and over 2 courses. Difficult, get it. But like, it wasn't as if we were given any forewarning. The coverage of the PGA was excellent. Like, this kind of just came out of the blue. It wasn't like we were sitting here last week saying, oh, geez, coverage could have been a bit better. I hope that's not what's going to happen again this week down in Victoria. And it was like, we just got blindsided by it. And to your point, there's a lot of people at the table. You've got a hybrid broadcast deal for starters between a free-to-air provider and a streaming service.
Which is tricky. You and I have both we've worked in a sport where that's the case.
Absolutely. It's difficult. It's not easy because both want different things and both feel as though they are as important as each other. Ultimately, though, there is a party on the other side that accepts a deal. And it's that constant balance between, do we accept for the sake of having product on television? I guarantee you the lure and the carrot of 9 would have been extraordinary. Like to have this on free-to-air television on Saturday and Sunday is an enormous, enormous win for the administration.
Agree.
So I've also got no doubt that there would have been some allowances made, some sacrifices made in the interest of that to get it across the line, and a very strict window of time that Nine were willing to broadcast golf across 4 hours. Perfectly fine. No worries. Keep coming back to how is it possible to miss any shot when your other partner is a streaming service? There is no competition for space. Bang a camera out there for 12 hours a day and hit record. I cannot fathom how it's possible we miss shots with KO as the other part. I just can't. Anything gets on KO.
Yeah.
Literally anything can get on KO at the moment. So we probably should pick up the phone. We could be able to stream this on KO if we wanted to.
Probably. We could.
At a price. Like, I cannot for the life of me understand how every show is not on KO. Makes no sense.
No.
No sense at all.
And look, I think, like, and I just come back to the initial decision that did we try and bite off more than we can chew in terms of a product in trying to roll out 3 tournaments, but then 3 tournaments across 2 courses? Because I found Thursday and Friday really jarring to watch. I don't know about you. Like, it was like, oh, we're at Kingston Heath. Oh, we're at Victoria. We're at Kingston Heath. We're at Victoria. Like, it was really difficult for me to go, like, I can't get a fucking visual of the course. Like, I can't understand it. Like, so I don't know. Personally, I would just love to see it be at one golf course because I just think it makes total sense. But if you do that, you probably can't run 3 tournaments at once. And
no.
I think it's a great thing for the game to have everyone in the one place. But yeah, it's really, really tricky. And I think the tour's probably got a decision to make ahead of next year, whether they want to keep this current format.
I mean, it's not. We are at the mercy in many respects of the PGA. You know, this tournament went up against Tiger's tournament, and was it Barbados or Bermuda? Which one? Barbados.
See, I don't even know.
Yeah. Like, but it went up against Tiger's tournament, so there's very few people saying no to Tiger who get invited to that. It's not a great time for the LPGA. They've literally just wrapped up their season. Like, women are trying to have a little bit of time off. I've seen a bit of commentary that the ideal time from an LPGA perspective would be February, in order to get some more names down. I mean, you know, we had some names. Obviously, Hannah came home. Minjee was here. There's some quality players. Soyeon Ryu, as I said. Jennifer Cupshow was here. But, like, if we put it in February, are we a chance to get Nelly Corder, MB Park, you know, Lydia Ko? If we are, then surely that's better than playing it concurrently with the men. That must be better to get the best women's players in the world here. We had it a couple of years ago down Adelaide. It was a great tournament on its own, huge field. So, like, I like the concept. It's wonderful in theory and in principle to play all 3 alongside each other. But we keep coming back to field. It's got to be about field before anything else. And yeah, things will free up with the changes in the PGA Tour from next year, and maybe we know that, you know, they're looking at, you know, having that time off at the end of the year, which gives people the freedom to travel and take time off, and maybe that's a better chance for us. But yeah, what we got, I don't think lived up to the expectations of what we had. I think that would be the simplest way to put it. And whilst I applaud the tour for pioneering an event where men, women, and all abilities players play all at the same time, I do believe in format, in broadcast, and in probably a few other places, some significant learnings from this year.
Yeah, yeah, you've probably summed that up pretty well, and they'll no doubt do it. And look, like, all in all, I'm going to continue to watch the broadcast because the broadcast of the first 5 tournaments of the year has been fantastic. It's been excellent. Like, the WA Open, the WA PGA was basically uninterrupted coverage from first tee shot that it started to the very end. So I will continue to watch, absolutely. But yeah, it's just there's definitely learnings for our biggest tournament that in such a massive year, it does feel like a bit of a letdown. And like the tour has done an incredible job of putting on this year's schedule. And the players that we've spoken to both online here and offline have all said that the tour have done a great job of getting the tournaments to where they are now. It may be just, I agree with you, feels like a little bit of a letdown for our biggest tournament, given how much it was hyped up to be, given that we hadn't had it for 2 years. So yeah, I don't know. I come away a little disappointed, having obviously missed some key stuff in terms of the broadcast. But yeah, I'm sure some changes will be made for 2023.
I say all of that and wait with bated breath to see how the Cathedral Invitational is broadcast tomorrow on KO. So,
well, yeah, fascinating.
It will be very interesting, because it's the same production company, right? It's GMTV, so it'll be very interesting to see how, and obviously very different. 1 day tournament, one course, limited field, affords them a lot more flexibility and opportunities. But you'd like to think maybe some immediate feedback.
Well, again, you've just kind of answered all the questions there. It's going to come back to format, right? Like, if the format doesn't work from a broadcast perspective, then we've got to change the format. As shitty as that might be, that's possibly the answer. I don't know. I think all the parties have to come together to have a discussion. But I think importantly in that, and unfortunately, the people that won't have a voice in that are the fans. Because it will come down to commercial revenue and whatever. And you can't involve fans in those conversations because it's too difficult anyway. But
it's too emotional.
I think like the fan is often the person that is left so far out of the conversation in all broadcast negotiations, but they play such an integral role.
Yeah. Look, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it earlier. Wonderful, wonderful crowds across both courses, across, all 4 days. The reality is that those crowds are a minute proportion of the broader audience of that tournament. And the other reality is that irrespective of whether it's all 3 tournaments played at the same time or not, those people are still turning up.
Yeah.
Because they're there to see their favourite player. They're turning up, whether it's all 3 at the same time or all 3 played separately, they're still turning up to the tournament to see the person they went there to see. So you probably should look after the people who are tuning on the television.
Yeah. Be fascinating to watch. And again, like I'll say it again, I give credit to the tour for what they've done this year. You and I have been, I don't know, we'd probably been skeptical before the season started as to what we were kind of going to get in terms of, given the importance of 2022/23, all the changes that are happening globally in the golfing landscape, what we'd heard in terms of rumors of things changing and everything. And they've had a fantastic year. And but I come away a little disappointed from the Australian Open. That's just where I'm at right now. And Gippsland Super 6 this week, which isn't my favorite tournament on the schedule. And then we have a break and we come back for the second half of the year, which is going to be massive because we get into the TPS events and the New Zealand stuff and some really cool stuff on the other side of the break. So
should be excellent, Drews. Thoroughly looking forward to the second half of the season post the Christmas break. That'll probably do us. You summed it up well, my friend, as you always do. Congratulations again to Adrian Meronk. Wonderful couple of days of golf. We look forward to keeping an eye on the Cathedral Invitational tomorrow. If you're listening to this Monday night, if you're not, it'll already be one and done. So that's redundant. Gippsland Super 6, you say, and then I'll do a bit of a break. So look, TBC on the schedule for this podcast in the next couple of weeks.
We're about to have a 5-minute conversation off the back of this. As to when are we going on annual leave?
What I would say is you'll hear us when you hear us.
Yeah.
I think would be the best possible way to describe it. So big going on in the personal lives of both of us. So TBC, but stay tuned. I'm sure there'll be something in the near future post this. On you, Dreads.
Thanks, mate.